Alrighty then. So, with the new update that's going to be coming out in a bit with Battlegrounds and PvP, I have lots of opinions on Battlegrounds and PvP, and I'm just making a video to talk about them in one sort of condensed place that isn't the multiple paragraph long posts I make on the forums about just sort of my personal opinions about what I would like to see done about Battlegrounds and how I think it could be improved in sort of class by class. My most elegant solutions. So yeah. Basically, I guess first things first, I'll just talk about a lot of what motivates the changes that I'll make and sort of what I think is better PvP in my opinion. So basically at the moment, in Battlegrounds, time to kill is too low. People just sort of run at each other with one-shots, and one of them dies, and that's it. There's not really any complex decision-making or, like, strategy. It's just telecast towards each other, draw a circle, whoever draws a circle faster wins. And if there's ambushing, then just whoever knows that the other person is there first just wins. But there's not any sort of counterplay or interesting, like, strategy. And at the moment, the classes that do good damage are sort of pushing a lot of the other classes out of the meta. Essentially, you just play Mage, Scoundrel, Paladin if you want to do well, or if you play anything else, it's just gonna sort of be a bad time if you're not, like, top 10 of that class in the game. So yeah, I think that time to kill problem is causing a lot of other problems, but it's sort of the core thing. That just, you can't play healers because you can't heal through, like, one-shot projectiles. And you can't play, well, you can play Paladin, because Paladin is Paladin, but you can't play Warrior because tanking doesn't matter. And if you play any other damage classes that don't easily one-shot people without really needing any sort of setup, then, you know, why not just play Scoundrel or Mage? So yeah, I guess first things first, the juiciest of the classes, Scoundrel. What are the problems with Scoundrel? There's a number of them. In sort of a bigger scope, Scoundrel is the only class in the game that's allowed to retain its one-shot when it misses, and is capable of stacking several one-shots in very quick succession. Beyond that, you don't even see that abused, because they just do enough damage to where they don't need to. They just throw up their flame, they walk inside of you, they click your trigger, and then they die. That's just how Scoundrel works. It's just like, oh wow, now you're dead, if that was a flame card. And I think that it could be a lot better. Realistically, I think all of the classes should be roughly on the power level of, like, Bard and Ranger. I think that it should just, like, my fixes are, like, I think it should just do less damage. Just flat, just make it do way less damage in PvP. And this is specifically for Battlegrounds. This isn't like I'll specifically say if this is something that I'm okay with being sort of broadly applied. So just for Battlegrounds, I think that they should do way less damage. I think that their flame card, or whenever they throw a card above their head, it should tick down like a buff. That the card should just go, like, do the whole circle thing, and when it runs out, if you haven't hit anything, it goes away. That's something I'm sort of on the fence about, with if it could be applied sort of unilaterally. Honestly, I think you could do it. I don't think it would really affect Scoundrels if you made the card last 2 seconds. Like, you can hit an enemy within 2 seconds. But the Scoundrel doesn't really need nerfs in dungeons, so I'm sort of either way. And yeah. And the reasoning behind those two things is that I don't think Scoundrel should be able to just keep a card locked and loaded rent-free. it makes it so that it's too easy for them to just snap use it, that they can't be surprised or ambushed, because if you walk up behind one, they just immediately have it ready. And more importantly, it gives them more places to store flame cards. Essentially, if you have the talent with 2 flame cards in your deck, you just go through your deck once, put a flame card there, put a flame card here, finish going through your deck. And now you have a flame card, and then a deck that has 2 more flame cards and a poison. So Scoundrels can essentially just you're in center, you got a 4-man team, they run in, one-shot one person, throw up their card, one-shot another person, rip through their deck, and within 2 cards they're going to have another one-shot. And that's a little bit absurd. I don't think that they should have that ability to do that. I think realistically what I would like to see Scoundrels playstyle be is I want them to sort of telegraph their one-shot. And this is going to be true with almost every class, and that I think that one-shots should be something that you sort of react to, that they sort of hit you with their curve shot. God, if I can hit it. And then they close the distance. They take their flame card that was on their thing, and they jump in and try and get you. But it gives counterplay. It gives interaction, which is that whole thing I'm trying to solve, in that it makes it so that when I'm fighting a Scoundrel, it'll be a lot more like when I'm fighting a Ranger, where when a Ranger's fighting me, they start pinging me with arrows, suddenly their threat level in the back of my mind shoots way up. And I'm like, oh man, I should probably go stand near them so that they're not able to generate pips anymore. And I think it's the same thing with Scoundrel, that realistically what I would like it to be is that they go for the curve shot, and suddenly I'm like, oh, I need to fight for my life. And then you're doing the whole sort of dance that you do, where you're jumping around each other, fighting each other. They're trying to land their flame card, but you have agency. There's something you can do about it. And that's what I think is important. And yeah. And then that sort of brings me on to the next class, which is Mage, which is a really good transition, because every time you ever talk about Scoundrel, people are always like, what about Mage? Mage is strong too. And yeah, Mage is strong. And I think that you should nerf it as well. People always just give the dichotomy of is Scoundrel bad, is Mage bad? Honestly, I think both of them are too strong. I think that they just do too much damage. That Mage is a lot harder to mechanically fix because they don't really have mechanics. Essentially, they take their wand and they just telecast in. They just draw their circles. And then they make their whole laser beam of fireballs, and then they just sort of just go into mid and kill people. Or if they're standing still, they can sort of do the whole spell weaving thing where they stack their spells on top of each other, and then they have a million spells, and they can just hit you with their whole death ball. And I thought about this for a while, because it is hard to fix. I don't want to give Mage a mana bar or something, because I think that that's dumb. The thing that I came to was I think that the only really way to fix it would be to probably lower their damage, just because, again, I think that all of the meta class, both Scoundrel and Mage, just should be more in line with the other classes. But also, I think that you should possibly make the spell lifetime shorter in Battlegrounds. I think that it wouldn't reduce their damage output, but it would reduce their ability to just make death ball laser beams when they're running into mid, just to make their spells last a little less long. And it has the added benefit of making Battlegrounds way less laggy, because from what I've heard talking to people, is one of the big problems with desyncing and stuff is just the fact that you have 17 million fireballs all over the place, and that makes the game kind of have a bad time. So yeah, that's sort of what I came to. For the most part, I think the only really thing you could do to Mage is that and damage, but yeah, I think that that's sort of how you would fix it. The third class that I think really would need to be nerfed is Paladin. Paladin isn't something that you see abused a lot, mostly because Paladin isn't oppressive in its capability to do damage. as much as it's is oppressive in its capability to just not fight. And also, Paladin would be kind of obnoxious if you didn't have Scoundrels and Mages doing what they do. If you sort of lowered the damage output kind of unilaterally, then Paladins would just out-heal people. So yeah, if the big thing with Paladin is at the moment in Battlegrounds, the current thing that people do is they just like ignore control points and they just kill each other because they don't really worry about winning. But if people cared more about control points, holy smokes, Paladin would be so strong. And the other thing is that Paladin is really obnoxious in overworld PvP, specifically with Goblin Token. That, you know, Paladin picks up the token, they just yeet their hammer, and they have the luxury of moving at out of combat mount speed when they're in combat. They just keep running, and they don't have to fight anybody they don't want to fight. So yeah, that's sort of the problem with Paladin. I think realistically, you would like it would mostly just it's not like a mechanical problem. As much as I think you would just want to tweak the numbers, like make them a little less beefy, make them a little less healthy. And the big thing is that I think that there should be counterplay to the whole hammer teleport. And realistically, my fix for that is that I think that both of the tanks should be capable of being stunned. I think that it should be like Musket Gravity Orb, Scoundrel Stun Orb, Hammer Throw, Shield Bash. Those things should stun the player. And that stun should result in causing the Paladin Hammer to stay in your hand. If it's already out, it should immediately go back into your hand. And you shouldn't be able to throw it for the duration that you have that stun on you. And that allows players to counteract that. It gives you some way of interacting with it, and it gives a lot of these sort of more support classes a place in the meta and in some additional capability of interacting with players. So yeah, basically, you get hit with the stun, and then you have the hammer in your hand, and now you're stuck. And in Goblin Token, essentially what that would mean is that Paladins need to be scared, because they turn a quarter and there's a musket or a shaman. That musket and shaman can then say, hey, actually, you do have to fight me. They hit them with that stun orb, and then they drop their totems, and they're able to sort of DPS them down, and again, now you're in that Dance of Death. And that Dance of Death is ultimately what I like about PvP. That's my favorite thing in PvP, is when you're sort of like locked in on a player, or locked in on several players, and you're just sort of adrenaline's running, not just instantly killing each other, but like making decisions, just trying to outplay. They do something, you do something, and you're just going back and forth. Just any mistake could cause you to die, but the enemy player doesn't have the agency to just kill you without you being able to do anything about it. So yeah, that's mainly what I would do about Paladin. Now, I mentioned nerfing Warrior, which at the moment wouldn't make sense because Warrior is like the worst PvP class in the game. But I think like being able to stop their sword rush with the stun would make sense if you made it viable. Because again, I want to stop the tank classes from just abusing the mobility and being capable of just teleporting past your front line to try and get the squishy people in the back. I think that should be something that they like aim to do, but they, you know, there's like a interaction. It gives tanking almost like a thing in PvP where you can sort of block people out from getting to your DPS. So yeah, how to fix Warrior? It's a lot of things. Warrior has a lot of problems. Realistically, like, make their shield do something. Like, I think at the moment it just nullifies physical projectiles when it wants to work and then does nothing against magic. Just make it block hits and shooty things. I think Warrior is really cool, though. Like, if it was good, I think Warrior would be a really interesting class, because their whole sort of workflow, I think, is super cool. The fact that they sort of like sword rush in, and that their shield bash actually works. It causes people to not regenerate stamina, and therefore they have like one teleport before they're stuck. Like, it interacts. It has like synergy. It makes warriors do like warrior things, They're not fighting like any other class. They're fighting like a warrior, you know. They hit you with the shield bash, you're stuck in place, and now they can combo. And then you get free and they try and sword rush in, hit you with the shield bash, and then they can combo. There's like a whole cat and mouse thing that goes on. And again, like cool interactions, and that's what I like. I mean, other than that, their talent that makes wound apply bleed should stack. It should not be that every time you do a wound combo, it just resets the timer on that one single bleed. That if they hit a bunch of wound combos, it should apply a bunch of bleeds. Yeah, I think that's all of that. Other classes. Musket, the thing that I actually play in PvP. Or at least at the moment that I've been playing in PvP. I mean, I like it. I think it's cool because I've been playing it. It's not very strong, but I sort of almost make it work, but not really. Honestly, the only thing I want is I want to be able to use my speedy turret on demand. And this is something that 100% I would, like, they should do unilaterally. Is I think it should be. At the moment, what it is when you have the talent that causes people to run really fast when your turret dies, the only way that can happen is if your turret goes away naturally. If I kill it, if an enemy kills it, it doesn't happen. Which is still pretty fun and cool, but I think it would be much, much more interesting if I was either capable of shooting it myself to then just, like, sacrifice a big portion of my healing. There's like, consideration to be made there. But be able to sacrifice a big portion of my healing to make, like, a big gamer play. To, like, run in fast to get near my DPS. Or run away really fast because I see a bunch of mages telecasting into mid. Alternatively, I would be super okay with this because I think it'd also be cool, is that I'm not allowed to kill my turret, but if an enemy kills my turret, it happens. Because it would make it still difficult to use, but it would give me agency on when it happens. Essentially, I see a mage telecasting into mid, I throw my turret in front of me, they accidentally kill it, and then I'm the heck out of there. Because that's my big annoyance with playing Musket, is, like, I have no mobility. Like, I just have no ability to catch up with players. So when I'm playing Musket, it is like a baseline requirement that you just have the ability to just snipe your turret from like 60 meters. Like, this is how I have to play the class, is just doing that. Because I move as fast as they do. And when I get closed in on, if I'm even marginally out of position, I'm just dead. Because, again, I have no mobility. I have no way of defending myself, and I have no mobility, and therefore I'm just kind of stuck. I'm okay with the rest of the class. I think it's really hard to play, and not super meta, but, like, it's fun, and it fulfills a role, and I think I think it is cool. The other thing being that if you lowered the damage output of the mages and scoundrels, it would make Musket be in a lot better of a place. Because the biggest reason why it's not viable is just because it doesn't matter if I'm full health with a shield orb. If a scoundrel, like, flame cards me, I just die. Even as a leather armor class with a shield. Like, a scoundrel walks up to me, flame cards me, I'm just dead. And scoundrels are the better of the two. Like, mages are even worse. Like, I have no capability of fighting mages. They just kill me. So yeah. Let's see here. Bard. Bard is a class that I think is in a sort of good spot. And like, not in a good spot in terms of, like, the current meta, but I think would be in a great spot if those classes didn't do what they do. It's, whereas Musket is sort of like a healer that's flavored as a tank, where I mostly heal, but I'm capable of, like, body blocking enemies and, like, intentionally using my turret to block enemy projectiles. Bard is like a healer flavored as a damage, which I think is good. They don't have huge damage output. They're capable of sort of threatening cloth classes, but even then they don't really one-shot them unless if that cloth class is sort of in a really tough spot. which is good. Like bards were the very first thing when I was ever fighting, when I would play mage in PvP, where I like had that whole dance of death. Like Jin would come up to me, he'd bop me with his mallet, and I would know that his crescendos were up, and we would just be jumping around each other. Like just he was going everywhere, I was going everywhere. I was just trying to bait out those crescendos, and he was trying to hit those crescendos, and at the same time, it felt almost like you're playing tag, but like both people are it. Like we're both sort of a threat to each other, and just by being near him, he's capable of hurting me, but also by being near him, I'm capable of not getting hit by his crescendo. So there's a whole thought process there. There's like planning, and it's interesting. So yeah, I don't really know if I'd really change anything about Bard. I think it is a fine class. I don't really play Bard, so I'm sure that like some other Bards probably have some opinions on things that might be better, but from what I've seen, I think if scoundrels and rangers, or not, I mean scoundrels and mages weren't just utterly deleting them, Bard is a fine class. It is cool. Ranger, the other class that I think is in a sort of good spot in the meta. It is a damage class. Like, it's not not a good spot in the meta, but just in a well-designed class in terms of PvP. Like, they're basically scoundrels, but without any of the dumb, like, scoundrel stuff. They can one-shot, but it takes preparation, and you have that whole dance of death again, where like they're hitting all their arrows, and then once they've got their pips up, that's when they can then go for that charged piercing, and it gives interaction. Like they need to maintain those pips, and they need to be far away from things, and if somebody sort of notices that, recognizes that, and like closes the distance, suddenly they're at a disadvantage. I think I'm about to desync, which will be fun. But, yeah, there it is. But, give it a second. I'll quickly just relog. But like, yeah, there's like this counterplay and there's like decision making, which is sort of what I want. Like, I just think that all of the damage classes should be roughly the power level of Ranger. Let's see here, Shaman. Shaman's another class that's in like a really awful spot in the meta for PvP. There's like one Shaman that I know that can do PvP, and even they're sort of big screwed. Realistically, I think that how you fix Shaman is, again, I don't want to make the classes work like every other class. Realistically, I want the classes to fight like what would their identity be. So like, I don't think that the Shaman needs more mobility or more capability of like doing burst damage as much as just like, the problem with Shaman is like, you have another player and you drop down their totems and you're like, ha, I got you, and then they just leave. They just walk away from you and you're like, oh well, I guess I can't do anything until my totems respawn again. And that's sort of the problem with Shaman, is that I think that the way that you fix it is that you give some capability of making it so that players don't just leave. That I think that their stun totem should, that their stun orb should work like Warrior Shield Bash, where if you get hit by the stun orb for the duration of the stun, that your stamina doesn't regen, and that would give shamans the capability of like shamaning. It would mean that like, you know, they drop their totems, they hit you with that stun orb, and now you're suddenly like can't. You sort of have one teleport to try and like do something with it, but if they sort of outplay you with that teleport, then, you know, you're stuck there eating their projectiles, as you should. The other thing is that, and this is something that people have said like needs to be done in the like in dungeons as well. It's just that when they drop their totems, they should get the orbs. Like they shouldn't have to wait for their orbs to come back. They drop their totems, they get their orbs. It would make it incredibly more playable in PvP because they would have some capability of like hurting players without needing to like stay hidden for like a solid 2 seconds. So yeah, that's sort of what I think should be done. Aside from that, I think it's it's a fine class. I think that if mages and scoundrels weren't pushing them out of the meta, then it would be at least closer to playable. And they would, again, have some utility beyond doing damage. Which is something you'll also probably notice here with a lot of these classes, is that I want there to be decision-making beyond just shoot fast, make die. Like PvP at the moment is almost exclusively determined by your micro abilities, but have almost nothing to do with your macro abilities. It's just like, can I draw a circle fast? Do I have good, like if I'm fighting somebody, it's just who makes more fireballs, who aims better, who's better at dodging. But it's all just very ingrained sort of micro abilities. But there's no, like, greater, like, thought process there. Like when I'm playing Musket, I am big braining. I'm thinking about positioning. I'm planning. I'm trying to, like, bait people into strategies and traps. Like, I'll take it, like, I don't have mobility, so, like, when I recognize that, like, we're roughly, like, 5 seconds away from, like, getting pushed on by the enemy team, I'll just, like, throw up my turret and just leave it there while I back away. And that way I can sort of set a trap for the enemy team to then, like, splash my poison off of it and, like, hit them into combat so that they can't close in on me. And I think that more of that would be better in the fact that I think that there should be, like, macro ability. That, like, your decision-making outside of, like, immediate combat should be important. And that there should be there should be, like, a more kind of interesting ways of interacting with enemy players beyond making their health bar go down. Things like mobility, like sort of reducing their mobility, or like getting in their way, or like trying to slow them, things like that. And then also ways of interacting with friendly players, like things like on my musket being able to like see that somebody's in a tough spot and be like, no, get the heck out of there, and like hit my turret and make them be able to run fast for a second. Just like big brain, because like those are the things that like make PvP really cool. Like I'm not gonna leave a PvP match being like, man, I really like just telecasted into so many players. I'm gonna be talking about that one time that I like mega big brained and like made like a huge like crazy cool like plan to like, and I pulled it off. Like I was like, you two go to this position, I'll go to this position and bait them in, and then you two will like close in on the side with your sword rushes and stun them, so then our shaman can like drop their totems and like kill them. Like that's the stuff that I want. Is I want like coordinated play like between the team and in between players. And those are the things that I've sort of seen at least a shadow of when I've been playing Musket. Because like I really enjoy playing Musket in PvP, and it has nothing to do with its viability. It has to do with like I'm experiencing what PvP could be. Like when I play well, I'm not just like, oh yeah, I deleted that player. I'm playing well because like I'm making gamer plays. I just saved somebody's life. And when my team is better than the enemy team, it isn't just this oppressive, just push them back to spawn and spawn camp them. Like, I don't know how to really describe this beyond, like, when you're being outplayed by a team that's, like, running healers and is beating you through, like, team cohesion and, like, sort of, like, teamwork, it doesn't feel as bad. Like, you see all of these interactions, and then you have some way of interacting back. And it's not just, like, a single player that's just casting Fireball while they run between all 3 points back and forth, and there's nothing you can do about it because they just laser beam. like you sort of respect it a lot more. Like you get them low, but then they get healed to full, and you're like, oh dang it, that healer managed to just snipe that heal orb. Things like that. And I don't know, that's sort of what I want. In terms of greater battlegrounds, I think that, like, I'm sure they're already doing this, and I made a post about this at one point, that I think that, I'm hoping that the battleground map has more diversity in sort of terrains. I would like to see, again, like, macro decision making, like, planning around the points. Basically, like, maybe one of the points will have lots of cover near it, and one of the points will be very open, and things like that. And that way, you can sort of plan things out. You can be like, oh yeah, if we hold this point, we have a really good, like, musket on our team that really performs well in cover. And that way, the point that they have to contest is the one that we perform well on. And it also just makes it a lot harder for this problem that we have in both in dungeons and in PvP, where, like, we're able to compare classes to each other. That, like, realistically, I think the ideal thing would be, again, by giving them these diversity of ways of interacting with players, is that it reduces this capability of just putting classes on a one-to-one, just, this class does this much damage, this class does this much damage. It makes it so that, like, oh yeah, mages do so much damage, but man, do they struggle when they're in that one place that has a bunch of walls everywhere, because they can't build up the telecast. And at the same time, you can be like, man, can, like, muskets not 1v1, but oh man, when they're stacked in a 4-man, holy smokes, they're going god mode. Things like that. That, like, it makes it so that people can't just maul over the fact that there's one best class, because there isn't a best class. They each shine in their own light, and they each have their own thing. And situationally, they're useful at what they do. But they're not just, like, one tool fits all, like what's currently happening, where you just, you just do everything. And yeah, I don't know. That's what I want. I just want players to be forced to sort of do something beyond just aggro running. Like, recognize, oh, this is probably not a good place for me to fight. Let me just not go. And these are all things I have to do on my musket. Like, this is something I have to do a lot on my musket, is recognizing, oh, yikes, that player went deep, and I'm not following them, because I'm going to die too. But this has been sort of my long ramble. I don't know, closing thing to sort of cap everything together in a TLDR. I don't know. Nerf Mage, nerf Scoundrel, nerf Paladin. Buff the other ones. Make them all interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Those are sort of my ideas.